In the area of workplace safety and health, which is where, I've worked for now more than 3 decades, we really do think that there's a real opportunity to move forward in a way that we haven't in many, many years. To understand where we are, I think you have to understand where we've been. And that was for 8 years under the Bush administration, a very anti-regulatory administration. In the worker safety area, they started early in the administration in March of 2001. The first major piece of legislation that President George Bush signed was legislation repealing OSHA's ergonomic standard. Very first one that he signed. A very first piece of legislation that President Obama signed was the Liddy-Ledbetter Fair Pay Act. And so I think it gives you a sense of that there really has been a change in direction. But we went through 8 years in workplace safety and health with essentially the regulatory process being shut down. After repealing rules, dragging the agency's feet, refusing to move forward, basically any hazards. The only things we were able to get them to do were things that were a result of congressional directive or core challenges. And so there were almost no rules that came out to protect workers for 8 years. So we start from a very big hole here, trying to move forward, things that haven't been addressed for 8 years. We also start with agencies at OSHA and MSHA that we've lost talented staff, and so there's been a lot of erosion. And so there's a lot to rebuild from to get moving again. OSHA is doing that. The people that have been appointed are, competent, dedicated worker safety and health advocates, starting from the Secretary of Labor on down, with Hilda Solis as Secretary of Labor. One of the first statements that she made after being sworn in was to make very clear to workers and to employers that there's a new sheriff in town, and we intend to firmly and forcefully but fairly enforce the job safety law and other labor laws. So at OSHA, there is a ambitious regulatory agenda, but at this point it's dealing with things we should have dealt with a decade ago or before. So the things that are on the list as priorities for us are a standard on silica, because we still have workers dying from silicosis in this country. A rule on cranes and derricks, because that standard is 40 years old. And you may remember a couple of years ago we had cranes literally falling out of the sky off of buildings in New York and Nevada and Miami, killing workers and killing members of the public. And so there are those kind of basic hazards, but they've got to deal with hazards facing pandemic flu for healthcare workers who are exposed, hazards coming from other chemicals in the workplace. So there's a lot of work to be done. And while we have new leadership and we have a commitment, a very firm commitment by the Obama administration to move forward in these areas, we still have a very cumbersome, very slow regulatory process. And when I started this work, the preambles of OSHA standards weren't very big. It was, big rules took 2-3 years to get, out of the process. And here we are now with the preambles on rules being hundreds, if not 1,000 pages long, trying to fend off any potential, objections from the industry. And we also have a process which has added many requirements, whether it's through additional requirements on legislation. OSHA, like EPA, is subject to a special requirement for small businesses to have a special say on rules before the process even gets going. So my concern is that the process is too long, and so can we get done some of these important rules, which some of them are just at the starting gate right now. And so one of the things we'd like to talk about with the administration is speeding up the process and removing some of the hurdles that have still been added, were added by Bush, and are still in place. One other point, and that is the issue of resources. As folks probably heard last week, the president announced that there was going to be a discretionary budget freeze for all of the non-defense, non-security related issues. I'm happy to say that in this year's proposal, fiscal 2011, that the workplace safety agencies and I think other regulatory agencies did relatively well, but they're under that cap. So and that freeze is supposed to last, or that cap is supposed to last for, another couple of years after 2011. So there are real concerns about whether the resources will be there to actually bring some of these rules forward and get them over the finish line. And I'll just close by saying, again, doing this work for a very long time, and what I've said to many people going through many administrations, that at the end of the day, that what you can count and what matters is what's in the Federal Register, because it's law, and it's very, very hard to undo those things. It's the people that you put into place, because again, once you're in the federal government, in a position, a career position, good people there, they stay there for a while and they do a good job, and the budgets you put in place to basically build the foundations for these agencies. So those are some of the things that we're focusing on putting in place and firming up during these next couple of years.